I suppose every city dweller has at least one story about a neighbor from hell. Mine just happens to come with an ending most people wouldn't believe. Or maybe they would, if they'd spent even one night listening to what I did. When I first found the apartment, I thought the universe was finally doing me a favor. After years of suffocating in dingy flats with mildew in the corners, roommates who didn't believe in cleaning up after themselves, and landlords who couldn't be bothered to fix a leaking tap, I'd found it, my sanctuary. The moment the agent opened the door, sunlight poured through huge windows onto polished wooden floors. The ceilings were high, with beautiful old moldings. The kitchen gleamed. It was the kind of place you could imagine yourself thriving in, cooking elaborate meals you'd seen on YouTube, sipping wine by candlelight, maybe even inviting people over, pretending for a while that your life was perfectly put together. It was barely within my budget, just cheap enough that I could convince myself I'd manage. When the agent offhandedly mentioned the place could be a little noisy sometimes, I barely registered it. Noise? In a city? Of course there'd be noise. Honking cars, stray cats yowling, the odd drunken shout at 2 a.m. Who cared? I wasn't one of those people who needed absolute silence to sleep. I told myself it would be fine. Within 2 weeks, every box was unpacked, every shelf lined with books I'd lugged through 4 moves. I'd made 3 separate pilgrimages to IKEA, buying more than I needed, more than I could really afford. Fairy lights, throw pillows, a houseplant that would be dead within a month. I wanted this place to feel like a home that loved me back. The first night in my new flat, I sat on my brand new couch, the TV playing some comforting background noise I wasn't even watching. I was so proud. A palace, all mine. No roommates, no one's leftover hair clogging my drain. I went to bed that night convinced I'd made it. I'd won. I don't know exactly when the noise started, if it was an hour later or if I'd drifted off and was jolted awake by it. A rhythmic thumping from above my bedroom. Footsteps, but heavier than footsteps should be. It wasn't so bad, not at first. Just someone moving around. They'd settle soon, surely. But they didn't. They never did. It wasn't just footsteps. It was dragging, scraping, like furniture being hauled across the floor. Chairs, maybe a dresser. Then more footsteps, like a parade of boots clomping across the room. I lay awake, staring at my ceiling, the shadows of my new curtains trembling in the streetlight glow. They had to sleep sometime, I told myself, but the weeks rolled by, and it felt like they never did. Every night, the same relentless stomp and shuffle. Sometimes I'd hear muffled voices, angry voices, sharp and mean. They'd slip into shrieking matches that needed no translation. Even if I couldn't make out the words, the tone sliced through the floorboards and into my skull. I tried earplugs. They dulled the worst of it, but nothing could mute the sudden crashes, loud thuds that would jolt me from whatever shallow sleep I'd managed to slip into. Something heavy dropped on the floor at 2 a.m. Sometimes I'd feel the vibration in my bed frame, like a distant earthquake. I'd stare at the ceiling, my mind conjuring up grim images. What could they be doing? What needed to be dropped, dragged, slammed, night after night? Then there were the other noises, the ones I hated most. The nights when the yelling turned to laughter, loud drunken singing, music with bass so deep it rattled my glassware, the shrieks and giggles, the squeak of bed springs banging against the wall like they were trying to hammer their way into my flat. You think you know what it's like to hate your neighbors until you find yourself wide awake at 4 a.m, pillow over your head, cursing 2 strangers you've never met, imagining every petty revenge you could get away with. I told myself I'd talk to them. I practiced in the mirror, polite, apologetic, neighborly. But when morning came, the idea always melted away. I'm not confrontational. I never have been. I told myself it would get better. They'd calm down. Maybe they'd move out. Maybe they'd kill each other. I'd lie awake fantasizing about it, I'd picture them packing up their endless furniture, stomping down the stairs for the last time, leaving me in blissful echoing silence. I know how petty that sounds, but you don't know how many hours of sleep they stole from me. I thought maybe if they knew me, saw me as a person, not just the floor beneath their boots, they'd be more considerate. So I bought a bottle of whiskey, something decent, not cheap, but not so fancy they'd think I was trying to bribe them. I rehearsed my lines. "Hey, I'm your downstairs neighbor. Just wanted to say hi. I know apartment buildings can be noisy, but maybe..." It took me a week to get up the nerve. My palms were sweaty when I knocked. The door swung open, and for the first time I saw them, the couple whose every move had seeped into my nightmares. They were younger than I had expected, rough around the edges. He had a smirk that made my stomach tighten. She barely looked at me. I made my awkward small talk, handed over the whiskey. He grinned like he'd won something. I thought maybe, just maybe, it worked. For a few nights, there was silence, or at least less noise than before. I remember lying in bed marveling how quiet my ceiling felt. I slept. Deep, delicious sleep. I started to think maybe I'd been too harsh in my head. Maybe they were just a couple with problems. People get loud, they fight, they drink, they screw. That's life. Maybe I judged them unfairly. Then came the knock at my door. The police, a polite young man and a weary older woman. They asked me what I knew about the couple upstairs. I told them the truth. Nothing, really. They asked if I'd heard anything strange. I laughed. Strange? What hadn't I heard? But no, nothing out of the ordinary lately. Just quiet. They exchanged a glance that made my skin prickle. When I asked what was going on, they didn't tell me much. Domestic issue, they said. Always the boyfriend, they said. I watched from my doorway as they brought them down the stairs. 2 stretchers, zipped up tight. Neighbors peered through half-open doors. Whispers in the hallway. I kept my face neutral, concerned, maybe a touch horrified. It was hard to fake. I'd been practicing pretending for months. They say it's always the boyfriend, and usually they're right. Usually. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's the tired, polite neighbor who spends every night staring at her ceiling, counting the seconds between each thud and scream. Sometimes it's the woman who spent a lifetime avoiding conflict until one night she realizes she's tired enough, brave enough, to do what no one expects. When the police closed the case, I slept like the dead. Dreamless, peaceful sleep. My perfect apartment is silent now, every night. My palace. I suppose that's why I'm telling you this, because they say secrets eat you alive if you keep them too long. But honestly, I don't feel eaten alive. I feel awake for the first time in years. And who knows, maybe I'll find another dream home. And if someone tries to ruin that for me, well, I know exactly what to do. I moved into this apartment about a month ago. After everything that happened with my last relationship, I just wanted a place where I could disappear for a while, start fresh, lay low, maybe get my head back on straight. I didn't have a big budget, so when I found this place, an old building tucked away on a quiet street, cheap rent, no nosy landlord, it felt like a good deal, even if the place was kind of falling apart. The first time I walked up the crooked stairs to my unit, I noticed how the whole building seemed to sigh and groan with every step. The floors creaked under my feet like they were complaining. The pipes rattled when I turned on the taps. But I didn't care. I told myself I could get used to it. I even thought the noises were kind of comforting. It made the place feel alive in its own weird way. My first night here, I dragged in a mattress and a box of clothes. That was all I had at that point. No TV, no couch. I didn't even bother unpacking. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the old walls settle. That's when I heard the footsteps. At first, I thought it was just someone upstairs moving around. perfectly normal. It's an apartment building after all. But the steps didn't sound like normal movement. They were deliberate, almost too even. Back and forth, like someone was pacing from one side of the room to the other. I kept waiting for them to stop. They didn't. Hours went by. I'd drift off for a second and then snap awake because the rhythm was still there. Tap, tap, tap. Always the same speed, the same distance. It started to feel like it wasn't footsteps anymore, more like a heartbeat pounding through the ceiling. I got maybe 2 hours of sleep that night. When the sun came up, the footsteps finally stopped. I sat up on my mattress, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I hadn't slept at all. Later that day, I ran into the building manager while I was checking my mailbox. He was this older guy with a mustache and tired eyes. I asked him casually if my upstairs neighbor worked nights or something, trying not to sound like I was complaining. He just looked at me for a second, like he was trying to figure out if I was joking. Then he said, "No one lives up there. That unit's been empty for years." I laughed. I told him he must be mistaken, but he shook his head and said they'd tried renting it out a couple times, but people never stayed. He wouldn't say much more, just mumbled something about an incident a long time ago. I tried to press him, but he changed the subject and walked away. I stood there, staring up at the ceiling like an idiot, trying to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe a squatter was living up there. Maybe the building was just old and made weird noises. I tried to believe that. I really did. That night, the footsteps came back. I lay there in bed, staring at my phone, trying to drown it out with music. It didn't help. The steps just cut through everything. Steady, patient. Like whoever was up there knew I could hear them. I told myself I was being dramatic, but each night it got harder to ignore. And then about a week in, something changed. It was around midnight again. I just started drifting off when the footsteps paused. For the first time, the pacing stopped completely. I held my breath, half relieved, half terrified to hear what might come next. That's when I heard it. A voice. Faint, muffled, but unmistakable. It sounded like someone talking through a wall of cotton, low and broken, like their throat was raw from crying. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it was a man's voice. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining it, until it stopped. Silence again. And then, just like before, the pacing started back up, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I cornered my next-door neighbor in the hallway. He'd always been polite, a guy in his 40s, quiet, kept to himself. I asked him if he ever heard anything strange upstairs. His face went pale so fast it almost didn't look real. He glanced over my shoulder like he was afraid someone would overhear. He asked me, "You hear it too?" I told him about the footsteps, the voice. He nodded, almost like he regretted asking. Said he'd heard it ever since he moved in a few years ago. Said once, late at night, he thought he heard someone crying, but when he asked the manager about it, they just told him to ignore it. He never talked about it again. After that, he stopped saying hi in the hall. If we crossed paths, he'd look down at the floor and hurry past me. It was like he didn't even want to be reminded of what he'd heard. I tried recording the noises. I'd leave my phone on my nightstand, microphone pointed at the ceiling, but every time I played it back, all I got was static, like the sounds didn't want to be captured. The dreams got worse too. I started seeing shapes in the dark, rooms I'd never been in, doorways that led nowhere. Sometimes I'd wake up gasping, sure someone was standing right over me. I'd turn on the light and there'd be nothing there, just the sound of those steady footsteps overhead. Then, last night, I fell asleep early for once, out of pure exhaustion. I don't know how long I was out before a huge crash above me jolted me awake. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. The footsteps were back, but different this time, faster, heavier, not pacing calmly, more like frantic shuffling, back and forth, like someone was searching for a way out. And then, right by my ear, as clear as if someone was lying next to me, Help me. I jumped up, clutching my phone like it could protect me. I was about to dial the building manager when the footsteps stopped dead. The silence was so thick I thought I'd gone deaf. Then 3 slow knocks. Right above my bed. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to breathe. I just stared at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. Then I heard it. The creak of a door upstairs. I don't know what made me do it, but I got up, I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bed, like that would help, and crept out into the hall. The staircase to the upper unit felt like it stretched on forever. When I reached the door, it was cracked open, just enough for a thin slice of light to spill out. My heart was pounding so loud I knew someone, or whatever was inside, could hear it. I pushed the door open. The air was ice cold. Dust covered everything. The floor, the cracked wallpaper, the broken furniture. But in the dust, I saw them. Footprints. Bare feet, leading across the room to a corner where the shadows felt thicker somehow, like they were alive. I stepped inside, the air pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. I could feel something watching me. Then right next to my ear, that same voice, softer than before. Help me. I bolted. I didn't care if I woke up the whole building. I tore down the stairs, slammed my door shut, locked every bolt I could find. But when I turned around, I knew I hadn't left it upstairs. There was something in the corner of my bedroom. A shape darker than the shadows, standing so still it almost didn't look real. I could see the eyes, hollow, burning, staring straight through me. Then it spoke again, not a whisper this time, but not loud either, just a breath against my skin. Help me, or take my place. Now I'm sitting here, every light in the apartment on, talking to whoever will listen. The footsteps haven't stopped. The voice keeps getting closer. I don't know what it wants, or what it wants me to do. If anyone is hearing this, please, tell me I'm not losing my mind. Tell me what to do, because I don't think I have much longer left. And I'm terrified that if I don't help,